Will a cyber threat interrupt your business as much as a natural catastrophe? And is your business prepared for these and other perils? Let's talk about it. Hello and welcome to Allianz Talk. I'm John Gambale, Chief Distribution Officer at Allianz Commercial in North America. Thank you for joining us today for a special live panel discussion on the 13th annual Allianz Risk Barometer report, which identifies the top global risks for the next 12 months and beyond. Today's agenda will include an overview of the report, followed by a listing of the top global risks. Next, we will dive into the subject matter expert insights on cyber, business interruption, and natural catastrophes. And we will conclude with some strategies on how to help mitigate and be prepared for these risks. I'd like to welcome our experts on today's panel. Ed Lee, Executive Underwriter, Cyber.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me.
Nancy Dorville, Property, Canada.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for having me.
Tom Varney, Regional Manager, Allianz Risk Consulting.
Thanks, John, for the opportunity.
The Allianz Risk Barometer incorporates the views of over 3,000 respondents from 92 countries and territories in 24 industry sectors. The survey was conducted among insurance industry specialists, including brokers, risk managers, underwriters, claims experts, and more. The survey resulted in a top 10 list of risks globally by country and by industry. Cyber, business interruption, and natural catastrophes are the top 3 business risks globally. These are also the top 3 for US and Canada. Other risks include changes in legislation at number 4, up 13% from 2023, macroeconomic developments, which dropped a few points to number 5. Fire and explosion is higher on the top 10 this year at number 6, followed by climate change, which remain the same. Political risks and violence increased to number 8. Market developments is new on the list, landing at number 9, and finally shortage of skilled workforce dropped to number 10 this year compared to 8 last year. Ed, I'll start with you. Since cyber is consistently on the top 3 list of the risk barometer, ransomware continues to be a hot topic for cyber everywhere. Why is that?
Yeah, it's a valid question. I think the reason why ransomware remains at the top of everyone's mind in the realm of cyber is because simply there's a lot more of it. And I think the reason for that is because we have so many more technological advances these days, namely artificial intelligence, to say as an example, that really enable and empower bad actors to do anything from launching large-scale automated attacks to creating the most sophisticated phishing emails, all in search of that big payday.
Right. So outside of ransomware, what other cyber threats should we be concerned about?
Yeah, I think ransomware is ultimately a smaller piece of the pie when it comes to the total financial loss for one of our insureds. The other 2 areas that I would definitely keep an eye and focus on would be business interruption and the shifts in the regulatory landscape. So with business interruption, there's really 2 main causes or triggers, if you will, that lead to a business interruption event, which would be your typical cyber attack, which I think we've all seen in the headlines these days, and also with system failure. And system failure is unique because it doesn't necessarily have to have a cyber attack trigger. It could be something as innocuous as a software update that went awry that causes the outage. And in any case, the ending result is a significant financial loss for the insured given the downtime. So it's no wonder that business interruption continues to be, another hot topic in all the risk barometer ratings. The second being the changes in the regulatory landscape. I think we've seen a real shift in moving from what was previously known as the traditional harm-based model into what is now considered more of a rights-based model. Taking a look back into context, I think we've seen way more claims in the more recent times that are really triggered by simple wrongful collection or sharing of data where proper consent just wasn't given by these consumer individuals. So I think we can expect to see a lot of shift in that area, in that segment of the threat landscape to come.
Thank you very much. Let's shift to the topic of natural catastrophes, which was one of the biggest movers on the top 10 list, landing at number 3. Losses related to nat cats exceeded $100 billion in 2023, with losses from severe thunderstorms reaching as high as $60 billion. Nancy. In 2023 is yet another record year when it comes to cat losses. Nat Cat saw the biggest jump from 6th position to 3rd. Can you identify the drivers for us?
Absolutely, John. Given that Nat Cat has been in the headlines quite often in 2023, from earthquakes in Turkey and Syria to Italy seeing hailstones that were the size of grapefruits, it's not surprising that Nat Cat has made its way to the top 3. As a matter of fact, it's the number 1 risk factor for 9 countries. So what transpired, right? So as you said, 2023 has been yet another record-breaking year. We saw over $100 billion in losses for the 4th consecutive year. The single largest event was the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, which came to about $6 billion in losses. But the peril that has the most impact, that had the most impact on the industry, was severe convective storm. So out of the $60 billion that you mentioned, $50 billion happened in the United States. So we're seeing an increase in frequency, increase in severity, and what's driving that? The first thing that comes to mind is climate change, and rightfully so. Right? So climate change has an impact on exposures, which increases the volatility within the market. So if we look, for example, NOAA reports that 10 of the warmest years since 1850 happened in the last decade. 2023 is actually the warmest year, and we saw a severe increase in droughts, in heat waves, and wildfires in many parts of the world, including Canada, where at some point it seems like both coasts were on fire at the same time. So certainly we're seeing a frequency, and as the temperatures continue to increase, we're also expecting to see an increase in frequency and severity. But there are other factors, inflation being one of them, right? If we look at the cost of loss going up is also driven by the fact that material and labor is more expensive than it used to be. So certainly inflation and valuation continue to be part of our conversation, right? But that is because it is such a critical part of what we do. From the client standpoint, they need to ensure that they have adequate values to make sure that they're insured properly. And then on the insurance standpoint, we need to make sure that we have proper values to price adequately and also to manage our accumulations. Then you look at supply chain, which my colleague Tom is going to unpack more, but that's another impact, right? Because as you saw, disruption within the supply chain, it takes longer to receive material equipment, which then prolongs the business interruption and increases the cost of loss. That's where it's important for our clients to understand what their supply chain is, manage that exposure, understand where weaknesses are, and come up with business continuity planning. And then you also have population increase and urbanization. So if you couple a densely populated area with an area that has aging or weak infrastructure without resilience methods applied, you are bound to see a very catastrophic impact. And by show of hands, how many people know people that retired to Florida, right? So you're seeing economic growth, you're seeing population increase in an area that has very extreme cat exposures. So those are some of the factors that go towards the increase in the cost of losses.
Great, thank you so much, Nancy. And we'll switch over to you, Tom. Why does business interruption continue to be an exposure of high concern?
Business interruption continues to be a high concern because it can weave its way across different areas of a business. As Nancy noted, supply chain continues to be a huge concern because of its impact on business operations, market share, and ultimately profits for companies. Really also the complexity of business interruption across all aspects of an operation, and its continuous changing as aspects and exposures change, new technology comes in and things like that are happening. This is a continually changing exposure. And the last thing is really with this change is the ongoing understanding that's needed, creating a possible unknown factor within a business operation, which again fuels this concern.
Thank you, Tom. Let's talk about some risk mitigation. Ed, beyond partnering with an insurance carrier, what can companies do to better protect themselves from the current threat landscape?
Yeah, excellent question. I think the cyber threat landscape in particular is very dynamic. It changes almost on a daily basis. So companies ought to really take a deep dive into their exposures more frequently to make sure that they have the adequate controls necessary to address these exposures. On a more practical level, insurers and companies can consider looking at how they're holding their data, especially with the changes in the regulatory landscape. reviewing their data retention policies and whatever they're collecting, and making sure they're purging the data on a frequent basis to make sure that they wouldn't be tagged with potential fines and penalties for wrongfully collecting or sharing the information. And then more importantly, even on a protecting from a cybersecurity standpoint, having companies invest in EDR technologies, which stands for endpoint detection and response, can really help aid in reducing the overall severity of the loss. This is evidenced in our Allianz Claims Trends presentation from 2023, which has excellent tidbits and examples of how EDR has reduced the total severity for certain companies. And I think that overall it's very important for companies to fight fire with fire and leverage these types of technologies that also have AI capabilities embedded within them. Because as an underwriter, it's very encouraging as well to see insureds and companies take the step and be willing to utilize some new technologies and adapt with the changing threat landscape.
All right. Thank you, Ed. Nancy, in the beginning, we talked about the dollar amount of nat cats in 2023. So what impact is that going to have on the industry?
Yes, it's had tremendous impact on the industry. If we look at the treaty renewal first, the 2024 renewal has been characterized as orderly. This is the word that's been widely used to describe it. And that is the fact that even though retentions remain high, capacity has started to return, right? So 2023 was a completely different picture. What we saw was a fundamental shift in risk appetite and in pricing. And that's coming from the fact that they've seen underwhelming performance for a number of consecutive years with increase in cat activity. So as a result, we saw a significant pull of capacity. We saw retentions going up and pricing went up as well. The insurers that actually fared better in this climate were those that had high quality data that gave more confidence that the insurer had done their due diligence in assessing inflation, valuation, and their accumulation. So now if we look from the insurer standpoint, we are as much buyers of insurers as we are sellers of insurers, right? So in our context with the higher retention, it means that we had to be even more stringent and even more cautious are the way that we were managing our capacity. Capacity for CAT is finite, so we have to make sure that we deploy it and we price it in a way that is sustainable. Another challenge also comes from the fact that climate is changing, and that is impacting our underwriting because modeling of the secondary modifiers, such as wildfire and convective storm, is more challenging. So this is yet another aspect that we have to consider. And then lastly, if we look at it from the client standpoint, our broker partners will certainly tell you that it was very challenging for our clients as well. They also saw increase in pricing, less capacity, increase in deductibles, so that they had to manage within their own portfolios, right? And again, the clients that fared a little bit better were those that had adequate COPE information. So we're talking beyond just your typical construction occupancy protection type of information, but really going into secondary modifiers. What kind of roof anchorage do you have? What kind of maintenance programs are in place? These are sort of the informations that help us in better assess the exposures. And it also created a climate where our clients were able to explore alternative transfer measures. And that is really interesting because ART is providing a possibility of filling gaps that may be left by traditional insurance market.
Fantastic. How important are accurate models to assess CAT?
Yeah, modeling is a critical step of assessing the economic impact of catastrophic events like flood, earthquakes, or hurricanes, right? This is how we identify and we quantify the CAT exposure. It then allows us to understand how an exposure is going to fare within our portfolio to determine if it's a proper fit and to determine pricing and terms and conditions. From a client standpoint, this is important so that they can understand how much insurance to purchase, but also to identify where they want to build resiliency, where they want to put risk mitigation in place or risk avoidance even, right? And the system is very sophisticated, but it's only as good as the data that is inputted. So if I haven't said it, I'll say it again. Data is critical and it's very important. So when information is missing, we have to be more conservative, and that may have an impact on the terms and condition and also in the way that we assess our accumulation. One of the big aspects of CAT modeling is to would consider historical events. But as climate is changing, that is also impacting this approach because historical data is not able to properly reflect future outcomes. If we look at Hurricane Irma and Michael that took place in 2017 and 2018, what we saw was that the actual losses were 2 to 2.7 times worse than what was modeled. So certainly innovation has taken place, but it needs to be continual along with the change in climate. RMS 23, for example, is the newest version that is going to be used widely in the industry going forward. So if we look at the impact and the severity that we see with CAT, innovation is going to come from collaboration from multiple stakeholders, from insurers to insurance to scientists and governmental bodies will all have to come together to really be able to build some sustainability here. What we expect to see also is more usage of AI and machine learning that are going to help with providing predictive analysis, and the benefits are clear, right? If we're able to understand what future outcomes are, we're going to be able to build in better resiliency. So all in all, data, accurate data, resiliency, business continuity planning are going to be areas of focus for 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, great. Thank you for those insights. Tom, can you discuss the interconnectivity of business interruption to many other risk barometer highlighted exposures?
Well, really, interconnectivity as it relates to business interruption exposure is a key aspect of this because it goes across many areas. As we've discussed with cyber and natural catastrophes, they are the top concerns from the 2024 risk barometer. But really, other areas of exposure are impactful as well. Fire and explosion, climate change, energy crisis, and also the introduction of new technology is actually things that can create a business interruption concern. It is an ever-changing aspect of a business. And in order for a business to have the resiliency that they need to continue to understand those and look for aspects that they have to mitigate those types of exposures as they go forward.
Right. So what are we seeing in terms of client resilience and mitigation regarding business interruption exposures?
Well, since the pandemic, really larger corporations in terms of business interruption and supply chain understanding have really done a very nice job in understanding it and putting things in place to mitigate or control the aspects that they have. Areas such as mid-corp or smaller type businesses where they may lack the resources or the ongoing understanding of these types of exposures have really not gone as well as larger corporations. What we're seeing now is what are ways that they can use insurance type solutions to mitigate those types of aspects, but also looking into how can they utilize outside entities such as risk consulting to support them through training, education, and then help them with their business operation and to mitigate these types of exposures.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tom. Ed, last question for you. So what's in store for us in 2024 when it comes to cyber threats?
Yeah, I think the saying goes, nobody has a crystal ball, but I don't think I need a crystal ball to put money on the idea that ransomware is going to continue being a threat for 2024 for all the reasons that we discussed today. And I'd like to think that we'll continue to see companies investing into EDR tools and also artificial intelligence in safeguarding the barriers of their environment, especially after having listened to our panel here today. And I think we'll continue to see changes and shifts in the regulatory landscape, maybe specific to the area of privacy rights for consumers, especially as we start seeing the existing laws being challenged by the evolution of technology. And I think maybe more on a positive note, we did hear at the start of the year that there were specific members from a notorious ransomware syndicate that were caught, arrested, and charged by government officials. So as somebody who does get notifications about cyber events and cyber-related incidents on a pretty reoccurring basis, I'd say this was a pretty uplifting moment for me and the team to hear that for once the good guys had won. And for me, I truly hope that there's more of those instances to come in 2024.
Thank you very much. Tom, Nancy, and Ed, thank you for your insights on the top 3 risks as outlined by the Allianz Risk Barometer. Cyber, business interruption, and natural catastrophes are just 3 of the top 10 global risks. To learn more about these and other risks, download the Allianz Risk Barometer directly from our website at commercial.allianz.com under the News and Insights tab. You can also find a short recap video on YouTube by searching for Allianz Risk Barometer. Until next time, I'm John Gambale, and this is Allianz Talks.